HSPF 01 일본팀 Roma Gorman and Yuto Haba.
Good luck to both. You want to do heads or tail? Tail? Their tail, their tail. It's fine, just flip it, I'll see it. Okay, I'm gonna go. Yeah, thank you for throwing it. Heads. Okay. So boys, you get to choose throw or con the first. Yeah, you get to keep your con.
Yeah.
Throw. Okay. What do you want to do? First or second? Second. Okay. So Japanese is our con. They're bowling first. And the Philippines are pro. They're bowling second. Okay. Boys, whenever you're ready, Roma. Let's start. Yeah. Do you have the mic there? Okay, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, judges. My name is Yuto Haba, and I will start my speech. So our topic today is on balance, intergovernmental emission trading is beneficial, and we define intergovernmental according to Oxford University is relating to or conducted between two or more governments. Practically, it means two or more countries is involved, and emission trading according to Oxford University is a system by which countries and organizations receive permits to produce a specified amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which they may trade with others. Practically, it means emission trading allows for first, putting the limit on carbon emissions, second, trading caps between the countries, and third, reducing the overflow by planting the trees or putting more money onto R&D. To make it easy, we define this topic as is emission trading system between the countries beneficial or not. And we have two important reasons why intergovernmental emission trading is not beneficial, which my honorable opponent and judges should know. Our first point is corruption and inequality. Our first disadvantage is that the ETS promotes corruption and inequality, making it harmful and unable to accomplish its goals. So example 1, carbon leakage or outsourcing. Outsourcing is when a developed country has another country, often a developing country, make something and then import it from the developing country. This will make the rich countries take advantage of poor countries, making the rich richer and polluting the poor country in exchange for a small profit for the country. Also, rich countries could simply outsource to a country which doesn't take place in the ETS, allowing them to produce however much they want for essentially no penalty. According to IB Times in 2015, a company bought some carbon credits and imported tax-free from other EU countries, then sold to domestic buyers, charging them value-added tax, VAT. EU estimated that this fraud has cost taxpayers or citizens more than $5.6 billion in lost revenue since 2008. This will make the gap difference bigger and the balance between the countries will fall apart. And our example 2 is bribe And bribes are another issue that can affect the ETS in many areas. Officials that set the cap for each country's emission could be bribed, inspectors could be bribed, emission data could be falsified, and companies could inflate their base outputs to gain more permits. With so many new checks being put in place and more things being self-regulated, it would be very easy to lie about something or bribe an official. And our second point is not solving the main problem. Our second downside is that this solution does not really solve the main problem, which is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions to close to zero. And our first example is outsourcing. Again, outsourcing becomes a huge problem, as we mentioned earlier, and this actually makes the problem worse. First of all, it appears that the emissions have decreased for the developed country, but the emissions have not decreased at all when you look at the world's emission. In fact, they might have increased. And I have an example. According to The Guardian in 2011, all the developed countries can claim to have reduced their emissions by almost 2% between 1990 and 2008. But once imports have been added to each country, the true change has been an increase of 7%. If Russia and Ukraine, which cut their CO2 emissions rapidly in 1990s due to the economic collapse, are excluded, the rise is 12%.
On the pro side, ready for speaker? Go ahead.
Honorable adjudicators and ladies and gentlemen, according to the International Panel on Climate Change, if global warming is to continue, then temperatures will continue to rise, hurricanes will become more intense, and the Arctic may even become ice-free. Global warming is an impending problem. If we do not do something about this now, these consequences will only become worse and worse. We strongly argue that this emissions trading system will be a primary step that the world takes towards achieving this goal. This is why I firmly propose the motion, on balance, intergovernmental emissions trading is beneficial. In this speech, I will first define the key terms, then move on to presenting the two arguments that we have prepared for you today. First, intergovernmental emissions trading is a global cap-and-trade system that allows nations to trade permits for a specified amount of greenhouse gas emissions. The true objective is to slowly decrease the amount of global permits so that overall greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced. Second, according to the Oxford Dictionary, beneficial means advantageous or resulting in good. For today's debate, we offer the criteria of cost-benefit analysis as the best lens to view the debate. That means we must prove that all things taken together, intergovernmental emissions trading will bring more benefits than harms. The proposition believes that there are more benefits than harms for these two reasons. Number one, environmental effectiveness, and number two, economic benefits. Now let's move on to our first argument, environmental effectiveness. The intergovernmental emissions trading system is an environmentally optimal solution because not only will many countries approve of the system, but also the system has been proven successful. In today's motion, the proposition side is considering all nations. When all these nations are taken into consideration, an emissions trading system doesn't hold one nation on a higher position than another. No one would comply if that was the case, leading to the destruction of the environment on a level of no return. However, by encouraging nations to follow this emissions trading scheme, there can be a significant decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. There has already been a positive result set out by the EU emissions trading system, the biggest intergovernmental trading scheme that currently exists. According to the EU Environmental Agency, carbon dioxide emissions declined by approximately 19%, or 4,611 million tons, between 2005 and 2013 in Europe. Moreover, Tokyo announced a success in reducing their emissions by 23% in the year 2013 using their own cap-and-trade system. Such examples clearly prove that the emissions trading system is truly an effective and environmentally beneficial policy that helps to reduce emissions. Therefore, the intergovernmental emissions trading system is an environmentally optimal solution. Our second argument is about economic benefits. The intergovernmental emissions trading system has many benefits, including cost effectiveness and economic flexibility. First, the cap-and-trade system has been proven to be cost-effective. According to Forbes magazine, carbon trading is likely to cost less than expected. Research showed that choosing a cap-and-trade program for sulfur dioxide emissions resulted in a range of 15% to 90% savings compared to the alternatives. This means that while the system is effective, it is also very inexpensive and able to save money. Second, the cap-and-trade system is economically flexible. Because the cap-and-trade system is an establishment of an entirely new market involving all the transactions that a normal market has, it will automatically adjust to different economic conditions involving economic recessions or inflations. According to Eileen Clausen, president of the Pew Center on Global Climate Change, unlike the carbon tax system, the carbon trading system allows the market to control the prices of carbon, which makes it easier to respond to economic crashes. Therefore, the intergovernmental emissions trading system is a very efficient system in that it is cost-effective and economically flexible. For all these reasons, please vote for the proposition side. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do you guys need prep time before your first crossfire? Okay. All right. Can you stand up? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will ask the first question. On your first point, you said that the 90% of emissions has been decreased in Europe and 23% of emissions has been decreased in Tokyo. I think those are the developed country. What do you think is going to happen to the developing country if we include it in the...
Well, first of all, we have evidence that clearly states that developing countries are incentivized to actually participate in this policy. First of all, in the Paris Convention, 195 countries agreed to this policy, which means that they're encouraged and they're incentivized to follow this policy. And second of all, we have evidence that states that all developing economies have an interest in this system because they believe that this system will bring them financial benefits, including new exports.
Okay, you said about Paris Convention. Is this Paris Convention, what is the aim of it? Is it for all countries to participate in emission trading, or is it to decrease the emissions from the situation right now?
Well, the Paris Convention contains clauses about this emissions trading system, and we believe that because they agreed to this policy, these countries are following the Paris Convention.
Can I see the data after the game or something?
Sure, you can do it.
That's fine.
We have a question about your arguments. So first of all, in your first argument, you mentioned about carbon leakage. Well, then how do you explain that this system was actually able to reduce the amount of emissions overall?
Maybe your data didn't have anything related to including the imports and stuff. So maybe your data only said about one country having this emissions lessen from the inside the country, but our data has the number of imports that has been increased, and if you include those, I think that it is not effective. And on your second point, you said that in US cost was effective, but in your first point, you said that EU was the biggest emission trading system. Mm-hmm. And do you have any example of the cost effectiveness in EU or?
Okay, well, first of all, this is not only proven in the United States, but also in the EU because it does create a price on carbon that drives emissions reductions, and also it shows that cap and trade can be extended to carbon and is able to be cost effective.
Do you have any numbers or no?
So first of all, we have evidence that states from the Environmental Defense Fund that in the EU, this price of carbon has led to a reduction of 1,048 million tons of carbon dioxide, and that this was this used a relatively low amount of prices. About your second point about the bribe, is there evidence that this actually happened to any of the ETS systems?
Yes, we have evidence that the Germany has been having a problem with those stuff. So,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. All right. On the con side, any speaker? Roma? Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank. I'd like to start my speech. In their contention one, they show the effectiveness of EU ETS or cap and trade system. However, in our contention, we clearly show that including outsourcing, the actual amount of emissions didn't decrease but increased. So from these, we show these evidences. So we can say that emissions trading is not effective in this way, since it allows outsourcing. And also, we show the examples of bribes and corruption. However, for example, there were problems in EU ETS. According to Climate and Capitalism in 2011, there have been a problem with credits being used twice within different markets. This is very serious because if this happens, they are not capping anything at all. So there is no meaning, and the caps that it didn't exist has been in the market and someone's buying it. That is a big problem, and it is not decreasing the amount of emissions. And furthermore, there are also examples that emissions trading is not as efficient. Like we show that emissions trading is not efficient since it increases the amount of since it had increased the amount of emissions, and also the numbers they gave were not truly only about emissions trading. According to EU in 2015, 42.9% of the reduction of the whole emissions from the EU was from fuel usage for transport, agriculture, the management of waste, and such. This means that most of the reduction emissions can be done by other solutions, and it doesn't have to be emissions trading to decrease the emission. And other examples to back up our examples of outsourcing. According to The Guardian in 2011, UK emissions fell by 28 million tons. But when imports and exports are taken into account, the domestic footprint has risen by more than 100 million tons. Europe achieved a 6% cut in CO2 emissions, but when outsourcing is considered, that is reduced to only 1%, even though they have been doing the emissions trading system. And this was the data in 2011. And also they give examples of, they gave in their contention too, they stated about economic benefits, and it will be a saving. However, like we stated, when outsourcing or all these falls or the easy ways out to not emit, easy way out from not emitting are considered, we believe that the numbers of savings that they show is not a benefit at all. And when this is taken in with all those developing countries or all the countries that is not ready to do emissions trading, this number will even decrease, and it will not bring any economic benefits. So for these reasons, their contention 1, contention 2 does not stand. Thank you.
Ready, second speaker? Whenever you're ready.
Time begins now. As the second speaker of the proposition side in my speech, I'll refute each of my opponent's contentions and present my rebuttals to their contentions. So the opposition's arguments were, first, corruption and inequality, and second, not solving the main problem. But before I move on to my refutations, I'd like to answer the question in their crossfire on how cost-effective this system was. And with this system, they had savings that are estimated between 4 billion euros and 20 billion euros over 2008 and 2012. Now moving on to my contentions. So moving on to the first contention on corruption and inequality, the other side talked about how the system promotes corruption between nations, but they haven't given us any examples on how or why this might occur with the system. They haven't backed up their reasoning on this, and we believe that this point does not stand. Also, even if there is corruption between nations, there are clean development mechanisms and joint implementation projects that help developing and underdeveloped nations. With a clean development mechanism, they start projects which can earn saleable certified emissions reduction credits equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. And with joint implementation projects, it allows a country with an emissions reduction commitment to earn reduction units from an emissions removal project, and it's flexible and co-efficient. Rather than promoting corruption, it actually promotes innovation and incentives, because according to CDC climate research, around 1.2 billion total carbon dioxide emissions were avoided between 2005 and 2011. Approximately 60% of the reduction was caused by the development of renewable energy and the improvement in energy intensity. We see that this evidence, it proves that with the emissions trading system, it promotes innovations and incentives for actually putting in development of renewable energy. And it also incentivizes nations because
cap and trade has been identified as the most economically, most efficient, and environmentally most certain approach to bridge the gap that specific regulatory mandates cannot fill. It provides incentives for low carbon technologies across the entire economy while ensuring that the hard caps are met. Therefore, rather than promoting corruption between countries, it actually promotes incentives and innovation. Now onto their second argument on not solving the main problem. The other side had talked about how the main problem is that emissions haven't or cannot be reduced to zero, but we believe that in the current state of affairs, the emissions trading system cannot possibly do this. In fact, there's no policy right now that can actually achieve this. We, the proposition, believe the main problem is climate change, and without the help of this system, we may go past the point of no return. The other side also made a point on how emissions haven't decreased, but with the evidence that we have presented in our first argument and in the crossfire, we've already talked about how with the EU ETS, they stood at 4,611 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents reductions in 2013. This figure marks an overall reduction of 19.8% when compared with 1990, or some 1,138 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. We see that with this, there has been progress made with the emissions trading system, and there have been decreased emissions, which achieves the overall objective of the emissions trading system and provides benefits, as my partner stated already in her speech. By actually having this system, it can have emissions reductions, as we stated earlier, and the main problem right now is climate change, and if we can actually work on this problem with the emissions trading system in a global scale, then we can actually achieve this goal with steps. We think that with the emissions trading system, it's actually a progressive step into achieving this goal with the system. However, if we don't have the system and we don't have emissions reductions, then we'll go past the point of no return, as I stated earlier. Therefore, right now, their contentions on not solving the main problem and corruption and inequality does not stand in today's debate. Because one, the system achieves its objective by reducing emissions and also brings benefits with it, as my partner has explained before. And two, what the system promotes is innovation and incentives for nations, not corruption, bribe, or deceit. So for all these reasons, please vote for the proposition side in today's debate.
Right. Before your second crossfire, you guys see prep time? No. Okay, go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the number you gave? The 60%. Sorry, I couldn't catch what you said about 60% of decreasing energy or something. Could you repeat that part one more time, please?
It's talking about how there was around 1.2 billion ton total carbon dioxide emissions were avoided, with 60% of the reduction caused by the development of renewable energy and the improvement in energy intensity.
Is it from the emissions trading, or just all those countries changed the strategy of the energy scheme or whatever?
With the emissions trading system.
Emissions trading, thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes.
May I ask a question then?
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So you talked about the main problem being that the emissions reductions haven't reduced to zero, but there's not really any policy that can reduce this to zero automatically. And we see that with the emissions trading system, we're taking a progressive step into reducing it, but it cannot completely go to zero right now. So what system do you think can actually reduce this to zero right now?
There are other solutions like carbon tax, for example, or we think or funding more in research and development, creating new energy, or like we stated in our, like I stated in my speech, that there is an example of most of the energy in Europe has been reduced by all those clean energy policies. So do you think, don't you think that, why does it have to be emissions trading? We think it doesn't have to be, we don't need to do emissions trading to decrease the emissions, because we suggested the data. What do you think about that?
We never said we're going to take all other policies out with implementing the emissions trading system. We're saying that the system should be implemented, but we're not saying all other policies should not. The carbon tax, as you've talked about, can be implemented as well with the system. We're not saying this is going to be the only system standing throughout the long term. So don't you think that these systems can be mutually exclusive and work together to achieve the same goal?
Well, however, emissions trading has too many downsides, too many ways out from not emitting. So we believe that it is more harmful, it does more harm than benefit. So there's no need to do emissions trading. Well, if you're gonna spend more money on other things or to put more power in emissions trading, we think we should intensify the policies of each country for clean energy or something else.
But it achieves its objective of reducing emissions and bringing benefits with it. It's cost effective and it brings solutions that can actually be beneficial. So why does this produce so many harms when the benefits clearly outweigh them?
Well, like we stated, $5.6 billion lost for all the taxpayers and citizens in Europe. These kind of factors cannot be ignored since it brought enormous damage to
Is
each
this due to the emissions trading system?
Yes, because of the fraud. We stated in our in our speech, it was purely from emissions trading.
But how do they correlate with each other? How does the emissions trading system bring this fall in money?
It was a lot. It was the evidence from IB Times in 2015.
It's time.
Oh,
You guys need prep time before rebuttal speeches? I'm sorry. Summary speeches?
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. You ready?
Thank you, Josh. So I will summarize this round. So the 81 was environmental effectiveness, and the 82 was economic benefit. And on the 81, they said that 196 countries have agreed to the emission trading system. I think that COP21's aim is to reduce the emissions. It's not to put every country into the emission trading system. So I think this data does not support the 81. And also, so it can be said on the 81 and 82, they are only saying about the face value. So they are only focusing on one country, and they are only saying that this country has decreased, the country's company have decreased a lot of emissions, but they haven't included the imports and stuff, which is the same thing as outsourcing. So we are talking about the emissions more in depth. So I think that what they are saying is face value, and as our data said, we can say that the emission trading is not beneficial. And as I said on our DS, we are saying that the outsourcing is happening right now in EU ETS, which is the biggest market right now. And if this happens, the gap between the developed country and developing country will open, because if developed country makes the poor countries make them, the gap will begin. The development will just get bigger and bigger, so that the poor country will not get developed as much, and they won't be able to invest their money on what they want to do. And also, they said that our data is not from EU, related to EU ETS, but as I said, a company in EU bought some carbon credits that is from EU ETS and imported tax-free from other EU countries, which is outsourcing, and then sold to domestic buyers, which is in EU, charging them value-added tax. So so this data is from EU, is related to EU ETS. Thank you.
Can we use 30 seconds of pressure time? Honorable adjudicators, as the summary speaker of the proposition side, I would like to sum up this debate into two main clashes. Number one, actual environmental change, and number two, does the system actually have economic benefits? So let's move on to our first clash, which is actual environmental change. So first of all, they stated a lot of evidence about outsourcing. Our responses to that were, first, this is a global system that we're trying to implement, and we believe that when all countries participate in the system, outsourcing will be decreased. Second of all, it is a hasty generalization on their part to believe that all countries are outsourcing. With only one example from the EU ETS, we believe this is only a hasty generalization. Moving on to our second clash, which is economic benefits. The opposition side has never provided any evidence that countered or disproved this unique benefits we had from the economic benefits part. First of all, we proved to you that this system is not only flexible but also very cost effective and is the most cost effective solution that is available right now. We believe that the emissions reductions were never refuted either, and if any good is done by this system, then it must be deemed beneficial. Judge, we were able to prove to you today 3 things. Number 1, that this system had numerous benefits, ranging from the environmental benefits to economic benefits. Number 2, that this system is the most cost-effective and feasible system we currently have in the world. And number 3, that this system's benefits clearly outweigh its harms. And for all these reasons, please cast your vote to the proposition ballot. Thank you.
Are you guys ready for a grand crossfire or do we have time? You're good? Let's go. Okay, let's do it.
Can I ask a first question? So you said on your report, you said that all countries will be involved in the ETS. But as I said on COP, I think the COP21's aim is not the EU ETS. And also, do you think that all countries will be able to agree with the regulations or things that the ETS will provide?
We think that already with the Paris Agreement on the emissions trading system, already 195 countries agreed with trying to take further steps with the current situation on climate change, and they agree that this is a current problem and situation right now. So don't you think that with countries actually taking initiative steps towards solving the crisis right now, it'll actually bring countries together with the emissions trading system?
I think that they are agreeing that we should reduce the emissions right now, but I think they are not exactly agreeing as that the EU ETS is effective or not. So I think I think you can't say that the whole country is agreeing with it.
We're not saying all countries are agreeing with the EU ETS is effective. We're saying that they agree with the idea that this ETS system can reduce the emissions. And we also believe that developing countries and underdeveloped countries will be interested because there are financial benefits for them. What's your response to this?
Well, first of all, developing countries aren't ready as technologies, they aren't ready to. We think it's impossible for those countries to adapt to emissions trading, and like we showed, there were there were bribes, there were corruptions, and it brought more harm than benefits. If it's done globally, we think those problems will even get bigger and larger since it's going to be done globally. What do you think about that?
Well, what examples have been given out in today's debate with bribery or deceit with the system?
$5.6 billion lost in EU, and
what does this have to do with the emissions trading system or with bribery?
well, I'm sorry, we didn't show this we didn't show where it was from, I'm sorry. It was an example of Germany's bank Germany's bank took advantage of the system, emissions trading, and put extra taxes on them to sell those caps. And it would cost the $245 million lost extra for the citizens. And also $5.6 billion were lost if you look at them in the whole EU.
Isn't it simply a generalization if you categorize just Germany compared to all the other countries that currently have the system right now? We actually have evidence that states that not only the US but also other places, including California, which is part of the US, the EU was able to save money because the system was not only effective but also saved money between 4 billion and 20 billion euros.
Maybe you're right with that the EU's company has been decreasing. US companies have been decreasing with the EU ETS, but have you considered that maybe the imports cost has been increased because of the EU ETS?
So, do you guys want to have time for your final figure? 1 minute?
Thank you. I would like to start my final focus. So, I like to rebut this match by saying that all the harms of emissions trading has been outweighing the benefits of emissions trading. As you can see from all the data we suggested, we can see that emission trading was a failure due to too many ways out in the system, or such as outsourcing or bribes and corruption. And also, they're saying that if more countries contribute to emissions trading, it will lead to less emissions globally. However, from these problems that we showed, this will only increase if it's done globally. So we do not think it will work, and it's impossible right now. Something must be done right now, not long term, or something that will decrease slowly. Something must be done now, and emission trading is definitely not the way way to do this. And yes, we showed many data about harms that emissions trading brought, and there were less benefits. And emission trading actually was a failure since the emissions increased while since emission trading started. So for these reasons, emission trading is clearly not beneficial at all, and these are the reasons why we should win this debate today. Thank you.
Time begins now. Ladies and gentlemen, as the final speaker of the proposition side, I'd like to explain why we've won this debate and why our contentions still stand. In today's debate, we are evaluating the harms and benefits, and we, the proposition side, have proven that the benefits outweigh the harms. We, the proposition side, will prove to you today with findings that the system incentivizes nations and brings innovation to new renewable energy resources. This is also a cost-effective system which brought savings of between 4 billion euros and 20 billion euros over 2008 and 2012. With these savings, we see that this is a huge benefit towards nations. The other side didn't weigh the benefits and harms in today's debate, only emphasized on an alternative of carbon tax, but bringing another alternative doesn't disprove the benefits of the emissions trading system. While the opposition side constantly brings up the fact that the German bank has lost money due to this system, they have never once clearly explained how this trading system has directly caused various failures. They've only brought up this one example. However, we've talked about the EU ETS and other nations such as Tokyo, which have implemented the system and are still continuing to do so. Now, also saying why our arguments still stand. On environmental effectiveness, we talked about how, according to the EU Environmental Agency, carbon dioxide emissions declined by approximately 4,611 million tons, and we see that this is a huge decrease, but they never feed against this point on their emissions reductions, which is the actual objective of the system. In our second argument on the economic benefits, we talked about how the cap and trade system has been proven to be cost-effective, with 15% to 90% savings compared to the alternatives of other policies. And the cap and trade system is economically flexible, as the cap and trade system is an establishment of an entirely new market which can automatically adjust to different economic conditions. We believe that if any good is done by the system, that the system should be deemed beneficial. We have outweighed the benefits and harms in today's debate, however the opposition side hasn't done so. So for all these reasons, please vote for the proposition side.
두 분이 너무 수고 많으셨고요. 다음 라운드 시작하기 전에 5분 쉬고 3시 50분에 엑스템포레니어스 시작하겠습니다.